So it's interesting. There's the fact that there are two cybersecurity conferences going on very close together, one at Tangla, one over here, shows that cybersecurity is indeed a very big deal, right? Before we talk about feasibility of international cooperation, right? So some of the questions that this panel was asked to address were, how feasible is international cooperation? How can countries work together? And how can governments coordinate effectively with cyber governance when responsibility is dispersed among different groups? So I want to show of hands, how many people here think that infrastructure is limited to the old bridges, roads? How many people believe that infrastructure is still limited to that physical infrastructure?
So they are in the cyber conference.
Nobody. Well, that's good. So obviously, you believe that cyberspace is part of the cybersecurity infrastructure or national critical infrastructure. How many of you here think that the cyber infrastructure is limited to the boundaries of the nation? Nobody. Wow. I should ask different questions. So I think the definition of critical infrastructure has gone beyond boundaries of nations, even when physical infrastructure is involved. So think about the sea routes required to bring goods from one nation to the other. Gabby talked about piracy, right? Piracy has now become a global issue. So this global infrastructure, or this national critical infrastructure, also includes elements that fall beyond the boundaries of the nations. So countries have their virtual infrastructure running through other countries. Think of what the impact would be of the IT industry not having broadband access for just a day. Not only on the industry itself, but on the government, revenues from exports, revenues from taxes, and an equivalent and serious impact not only to the exporting country, but to the country that's getting those goods and services. So the question no longer remains whether quality is feasible, but rather how do you make it possible? I know Gabby alluded to the same aspect before, which is, if countries like the US and Iran can cooperate, why can't we figure out a way for all other countries to cooperate on cybersecurity issues and cyber infrastructure, which is now being considered part of the critical infrastructure? We all know that countries are sharing expertise because of globalization. People are building solutions in one country, using that experience gained in one, and the lessons learned elsewhere to better their solutions that are now being implemented everywhere. Commercial enterprise is thriving through the free exchange of ideas, and this is now the norm, no longer the exception. There's cross-border cooperation to ensure national security, and when it agrees that critical infrastructure should include cyberspace, there is no reason that such cross-border cooperation cannot be real. I think there's a case to be made that collaboration is required, not just desired. For anyone looking for additional incentives or convincing that there needs to be cooperation, know that the people or entities launching cyber attacks are collaborating around the globe. They're not sitting in conference like this discussing how they should attack everybody, right? They're collaborating in virtual space and doing it every day.
They have virtual conferences.
They do. And how many of you guys have heard of Silk Road? Anybody heard of Silk Road?
Yeah, sure.
So this came out a few weeks ago, right? They arrested a guy in the US who had created a network where people could trade any kind of goods and services. And the remarkable thing was they were collaborating online. They were using Tor to create this collaboration. Furthermore, they were paying each other with a new type of currency, Bitcoin, and you could actually buy a hit, or, kill for hire for about 150,000 Bitcoins. So it's remarkable what people are doing, the various activities that they're embarking on. So cooperation to better protect people's infrastructure and ensure safety is critical today. So how do you go about trying to accomplish this, right? We all know that it's complicated. So first we can start with identifying a set of problems. Let's look at a simple example of education and awareness. For example, there seems to be universal recognition at this conference and the other that the skill set required to do effective cybersecurity for cybersecurity analysts is in short supply around the globe. It is in the interest of the enterprise to build these skill sets, and for academic institutions like MIT, who are responding to market demands to build those skill sets. In fact, just yesterday I also talked to two professors, one from IIT, who was challenging himself to build that base of experience and expertise essential for effective cybersecurity. Companies are establishing centers of excellence in multiple sites. They're collaborating with academic institutions to share what they learn and seed research. In fact, our company, Norris, the subsidiary of Boeing, has worked actively with 10 universities at a time, and we've rotated about 50 or 60 universities through the program, where we get not only students onto our campus, where they are embedded with our staff working actively on solutions, but we also have professors come and spend the entire summer with us so that they're exposed to real-life problems. The benefit is that they take back this experience, go back and seed further research at the academic institutions, and we benefit from creating this viral effect of them going and further engaging other students and other professors, ultimately creating IP that's beneficial not only to them, to us as Norris, but also to the rest of the community. So in some cases, our research produces very innovative approaches, and yes, sometimes it produces approaches that are never usable. Please don't tell the army of PhDs that I said this. Oh wait, you're being recorded. Sorry, if anybody hears that. So maybe apply to governments, this might mean establishing a common set of training needs, creating training programs to meet those needs. It continues to surprise me how very simple things are not common practice, like the use of passwords. And yes, not just using a password where the password itself is the word password. It's remarkable that about 60% of people in India have made some kind of purchase on it, but yet 40% have no password for that mobile phone. Not installing antivirus systems on a computer. The opportunity for very basic awareness generation is tremendous. I know that in San Francisco, the city council and the police departments are working with smartphone vendors to create a type of kill switch which can potentially prevent theft of phones, because the phones can be rendered useless by the single push of a button. While this is not directly related to cybersecurity, it shows that there are models where public-private partnerships work. After collaborating on a common set of problems, the next stage might be to identify and establish a common set of goals. Again, this was alluded to earlier. Let's find a common set of goals that industry can agree on, governments can agree on, and nations can agree on. Interestingly, this is the same challenge that enterprises face today, making multiple people on a team work together. The task is easier if they have a common set of goals and a clear set of measures. Making cyberspace secure for everyone has, in my humble opinion, taken the same similar meaning as keeping the streets safe. Look, I'm a scientist and a realist. We have to realize that the legal and regulatory and policy frameworks are different from country to country. This means that the tactics might differ from country to country. Trying to impose tactics universally does not work. I know I have a hard time convincing my wife and kids to listen to me. So I can only imagine what would happen when you put a bunch of nations and industries and people together. So establishing a framework that nations and enterprises agree upon would be a good start. And maybe the best way to start is a partnership between governments and industry organizations. With industries having a global footprint, it is likely that best practices adopted by one branch in one country are going to automatically proliferate into the other branches in other countries. My point being that we have to move the process forward because the nefarious elements are not waiting. What we have to remember is that networks are borderless. So it's becoming harder and harder to understand where national boundaries start and end in the cyber world. Further, commercial, national, and government interests intersect. Protection of human life, safety, and protection of commerce. Three common goals that all people have. The last part of the discussion on this panel was to revolve around the ability to develop effective cyber governance when the ownership is distributed across several ministries and departments or organizations. I keep pointing back to corporations and draw the parallels. Let me elaborate. There are several organizations, corporations, where departments work in silos and there is no coordination of effort and cohesion. What changes that is when the goals of the leadership are aligned. I believe that when they agree on common goals, other things will follow. Let's take the example of broadband deployment. When industry and governments cooperated, granted there were some lessons learned and some missteps taken along the way, but that provides a good model, especially if you look at countries like South Korea, where broadband access, even on cell phones, people can watch streaming TV. And there was a lot of industry and government partnership in getting that infrastructure to be real. This applies to cooperation. This concept also applies to cooperation among nations and cooperation between government and industry groups. I know that almost every industry group is forming subcommittees or finding other ways to address challenges posed by cybersecurity. Yes, establishing common goals is not easy, but the focus on aligning on tactics might be the second step if you first find alignment on goals. I'm neither a real policy expert, nor am I going to claim to be one. So how can you go about establishing? How can you go about establishing the common goals? Comes down to policies. But I would argue that it is imperative that we start the process. Think about what is, I gave the example of Silk Road and how they're not waiting around for us to act. So if these nefarious organizations can show that they can cooperate, create this sophisticated network, wonder what's stopping us. Especially if we believe that cyberspace is part of the critical infrastructure and we agree that it is relatively boundaryless, it has to become a priority. I'm going to close with a quote from, who else but Mahatma Gandhi, where he said, we must be the change that we wish to see.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Eric?
Okay, my pleasure. Thanks. First of all, thanks again.